Iran is playing hardball with the United States and especially Donald Trump. No, you heard that right. That's not saying that Trump is playing hardball with Iran. And of course, he's been doing that for a long time and threatening all kinds of military action. There will be bombings, etc. Or if they'll make a negotiated settlement, we can work with that. And then kind of going back and forth with a lot of that. But as it's turning out, Iran is not exactly shaking in their boots or in their desert sandals, as the case may be in this case. And to try and help us make sense out of that, we have one of our favorites, Larry Johnson, on today, former CIA analyst and just all around great guy. So, Larry, first of all, just welcome back to the show.
Thanks, Danny. I appreciate the generous comments, but you are a generous soul.
Always good to have you on. I always look forward to these because number one, I always love to see what shirt you're going to wear. And then number two, I never know what you're going to say for sure. And I think most of our audience appreciates that. So that's really good. And we got a lot of stuff for you to talk about today. And I want to jump right in with this. We just had a show where we did with John Mearsheimer about some of this Truth Social that came out by Trump just moments before, not long ago, less than an hour, I think, and where he's talking about both the Russia-Ukraine war and about Iran. And then for you, I want to start off with the Iranian part. Gary, if we can toss that Truth Social up there, because I want to start off with that because I think there's a lot
Keeps freezing
here.
up.
Who's freezing up? Am I freezing up? There we go. Can you hear me now? Is anybody hearing me?
Yeah, I hear you now.
Okay,
you're
sorry.
back.
I hope that's not me on the line here. But anyway, I want to focus on what's been said here because Trump came out today and a little bit of a surprise. Starts off really big flourish talking about that Russia's about to do something to Ukraine. More on that in a minute. But he took the same opportunity in that same Truth Social with Putin to say that we also discussed Iran and the fact that the time is running out on Iran's decision pertaining to nuclear weapons, which must be made quickly. I stated to President Putin that Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon, and on this, I believe we are in agreement. President Putin suggested that he will be participating in the discussions with Iran and that he could perhaps be helpful in getting this brought to a rapid conclusion. It is my opinion that Iran has been slow walking their decision on this very important matter, and we will need a definitive answer in a very short period of time. First of all, what do you make, Larry, of the fact that he keeps using all these like maybes and kinda and hopefullys in terms of what Putin is going to do with Iran? And in fact, what is he trying to get from Putin altogether on this?
Well, he's being disingenuous, number one, and he's trying to buy himself some political space with the Zionists and the neoconservatives. The reality is, Iran agrees with him. We don't want a nuclear weapon. We're not building a nuclear weapon. We don't have a nuclear weapon. So you want an agreement with us that we're not going to build a nuke? Fine, we'll take that deal. But we're not going to give up our right as a nation to enrich uranium at the 3.6% and probably now at the 20% level because that's used for medical research. But with that, Ronson, you can come in, you can inspect. And what makes this possibility of agreement and Russia's role in this so critical now is if you go back 10 years when the JCPOA was first signed, at that point, Russia and China were in line with the United States in threatening Iran with sanctions. Iran in 2015 was isolated. You had both Russia and China willing to line up with the Obama administration in pressuring Iran. Well, that situation now has completely changed. Both Russia and China have come to the realization that the United States is completely untrustworthy and that its international rules-based order only works one way, and that's in the favor of the United States. Russia signed on January 17th of this year a full comprehensive strategic agreement with Iran, which included the development of the nuclear energy sector for peaceful purposes. One thing Russia can guarantee you is they're not going to allow Iran to have a nuke. They don't. Russia is much more stringent about nuclear proliferation than the United States. I mean, the United States allows Israel to have a nuke, among other things. So what Trump is saying is that, yeah, the agreement's there, but it's going to be, he's going to use Russia as sort of an excuse, but they've got the agreement. Where it's going to break down is if Trump and Witkoff continue to, they've changed their position, many times over the last 2 weeks. They've gone from saying, we'll allow some enrichment to no enrichment, zero enrichment. Well, we'll allow some. They're back and forth, and the Iranians are
one
going.
of those was on the same day, by the way. That was really puzzling to me.
Yeah, the Iranians sitting there shaking their head, going, "What the hell's going on with these people?" Or they wonder if they're dealing with that character Sybil, the multiple personality disorder person.
Oh man,
yeah. The Trump administration, they're really in a bit of chaos right now, in my view.
That is such a great point that you bring up there. It's something I hadn't even considered, is that in the JCPOA, Russia and China were both nominally even on the same side as the U.S. administration was, and they were putting pressure on them, which Iran was willing to do if they thought they could get sanctions relief, et cetera. But now then, as you say, that is completely changed, and there's only one reason that's completely changed, and that's because ironically, the vice president at the time of the Obama administration ensured that China and Russia would now be on the side of Iran instead of on our side against Iran. And I think that is such a insufficiently considered dynamic about what Biden had done, and now Trump hasn't done much to turn it off against the Russians. It drives Russia, China, and North Korea and Iran into each other's arms.
Yeah, well, and then the threats against China on tariffs. China's enraged. They are absolutely furious with the United States. Now, they don't get emotional. They don't show it outwardly. But I would note that within the last 2 weeks, you've had the first train trip across from China direct to Iran going through Kazakhstan, I believe it was. So that's the Belt and Road Initiative right there. And then you have Russia and Iran signing this security arrangement on January 17th of this year, 3 days before Trump is sworn in. They now have a solid relationship. And all three countries conducted their 7th annual military exercise just off the coast of Iran. So whereas Iran was isolated 10 years ago, that's not the case now. And it recognizes it's got more international backing and support than it did 10 years ago, and that neither Russia or China are lining up to say, oh, we got to deal with the United States. In fact, it's just the opposite. They're carving out a new economic and security order separate from the United States, ignoring us.
Which does include officially Iran, if I'm not mistaken, right? The BRICS.
Yes.
Yeah, so that's also didn't exist back at least with Iran back in 2015 as well, and perhaps because of all those things, you don't have the Ayatollah exactly shaking in their boots. And as a matter of fact, earlier today, according to CNN, it was reported that Iran's supreme leader slams the U.S. proposal, says it will continue to enrich uranium. And if you scroll down a little bit there, Gary, if you could, what they're quoting the Ayatollah is saying is that he said that the first word of the U.S. is that Iran should not have a nuclear industry and should rely on the United States, Khamenei told the crowd. And then if you roll down a little bit further, underneath that advertising there, he continued on and said, our response to the U.S. nonsense is clear. They cannot do a damn thing in this matter. Why in the world, Larry, would Iran trust the United States with its nuclear, civilian nuclear power needs when we have shown that we got out of the previous agreement? I mean, didn't we put ourselves in this position?
Well, in fact, we violated the first agreement. That's what Iran remembers, is that they limited enrichment under that agreement and were promised that they could get the 20% enriched uranium, which is used for medical research, medical isotopes, treatment of cancers. And when the time came to get that, the United States blocked it. The economic sanctions were also supposed to be lifted. Europe and the United States blocked that. So Iran's going, we made a deal. Those guys, the West, welched, They're not eager to get back into a deal. And then on top of that, they're watching, again, the confusing, contradictory messages coming out of Washington. I mean, really, Trump's turned this into a bit of a clown show, and it's unfortunate.
Well, let's take a look at that issue there. You mentioned about the reprocessing percentages that Trump has apparently said that the United States is ready to go to war over if they don't give up that capacity. But in international law, is there anything, and in the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, is there anything that would prevent them from having a peaceful nuclear power plant?
No, nothing at all. In fact, I understand that even under some of the international atomic energy guidelines, the country could actually enrich up to 99% if they wanted, without it necessarily being a violation. Now, the only reason Iran escalated its enrichment over the last 8 years from up next around 60% was to put leverage on the West in order to say, you keep saying that you're worried about this. Okay, this is what we're capable of. Give us a deal. Because they did one out from under the economic sanctions. I mean, the economic sanctions, at least until they got into BRICS, were really causing some significant harm to the economy. But Iran is, they've got their pride as a nation. And despite the narrative in the West that the number one sponsor of terrorism, not true. Can show you not by my numbers, but by the U.S. State Department's own numbers going back 25 years. Simply not true. That it is this religious Islamic state bent on destroying us. Yet the terrorist attacks that have hit America since 9/11 were carried out by Sunni extremists linked to Saudi Arabia and the Gulf Arabs, not Iran. And yet we continue to project on Iran all the things that the Taliban are doing. Taliban, not the Shia Muslims, not backed by Iran. And the Afghan Mujahideen, again, financed by the CIA, my old outfit with, Milt Bearden was one of the guys doing it back then. So we continue to create this mythology about Iran and our hostility towards it, when in fact, the United States, the biggest culprit in making this a bad relationship is the United States, going back to our decision to overthrow the democratically elected government of Mossadegh in 1953.
Yeah, that was the original sin. I think that we're still paying a lot on that. Let me circle back around to the Iran. I'm sorry, to the China and the Russia element of this. It sounds pretty clear that the Ayatollah is ready to say, yeah, we're not going to have a deal with no reprocessing. We'll do lots of other things, which they have continued to say. So they haven't shut off negotiations. But Trump has set his own red line. And he's emphatically wrote it with all caps and stuff in a recent Truth Social that there won't be any negotiations. Well, there won't be any reprocessing. Well, then he's put himself in a position where either he has to put up or shut up. And so if he puts up and there's actually a military action, what kind of retaliation or reaction could China and Russia have? Or will they just stand by and let Tehran be destroyed?
Well, I don't think they're going to. Number one, the United States is incapable of destroying Iran unless it decides to use nuclear weapons. And if it does use nuclear weapons, then China and Russia will be involved, and we'll have potentially see the end of the world. But if the United States, if it decides to try to attack Iran, it's going to suffer significant losses, not only in terms of aircraft, but also in terms of our military personnel in the region. Iran's going to take out Al Udeid Air Force Base, which is over in Doha, in Qatar. And that's a significant base for the United States. There's also an air operations center that controls all air assets throughout Middle East, West Asia, however you want to call that region, that's located all there at Al Udeid as well. So Iran is going to be in a position to inflict not only massive damage on the United States, but on Israel. And Israel's the one that's going to find that it's not in a position to defeat or defend against Iranian missiles when they decide to launch the counterattack. So this is again, this is Trump shooting his mouth off. Oh, we're going to go in there and show those Houthis. Well, how did that work out? You know what? We lost, and it's a perpetuation of this self-delusion, self-deception that runs throughout the U.S. military. This is a little unrelated, but it's been eating at me since yesterday. Here was Jack Keane saying, well, Russia's not so good. They failed to beat Ukraine in 3 years. You know what, Jack? How many years were we in Afghanistan? How many years were we in Vietnam? Shut the hell up. You have no room to talk. You don't even recognize that the U.S. military's limitations and failure to beat guys who didn't even, at least the Ukrainians got tanks and armored vehicles and drones. Hell, we couldn't beat a bunch of goat herders in the mountains of Afghanistan, for God's sake. Sorry, but I get worked up over that.
Gary, do we still have that video that he's talking about? Is that still on our playlist? We've been talking about that one before. If we don't, we'll
yeah. Let me check it out.
Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah. If anybody hadn't seen it, I think it deserves to be shown again. And you talk about the situation first of all with the Houthis there. I mean, one of the reasons we shut that down is because Trump finally realized belatedly that we couldn't do it, even though it should have been painfully evident from before the decision was made. But I'm thinking, man, if you recognize you can't take down the Houthis, then by what possible rationale do you think that you can handle the Iranians? I don't get the logic there.
Yeah, there is no logic and there is no thinking about it. That's what's so damn dangerous, that they indulge these fantasies that, we're all powerful. We're not. And, this extends over into the whole situation with respect to Ukraine as well, that, Trump talks a good game, but, we've got some signs that he's, let's say the pucker factor for Donald Trump has gone up significantly in the last 2 to 3 days. He's starting to act a little more conciliatory. You notice in his conversation with Putin today, he didn't call him crazy. Didn't suggest didn't suggest that Putin was doing something out of the ordinary. That Donald Trump was going to set him straight. Donald Trump was sort of, let's call it, conciliatory, and mentioning, he said he's going to have to respond to those drone attacks, and I guess he's going to.
Yeah, and in fact, let's go back to that truth. So, wait, Gary, do you have that other video yet?
Yeah, indeed. Here.
Okay.
Russia is not giving up the fight because they believe they can win. Even though 39 months into this thing, they haven't been able to take Ukraine. Think about that. That's how long we fought in World War II to get rid of the Nazis in Europe. Yeah. So it's really quite remarkable.
Really quite remarkable.
Yeah. What's remarkable, dumbass, is how long did we fight in Korea? Huh? Oh, and we didn't win that. How long did we fight in Vietnam? We certainly didn't win
those historical analogies.
Yeah. How long did we fight in Iraq? And you want to call that a victory? How long did we fight in Afghanistan? And we've been fighting in Syria. I mean,
wow.
Good Lord. I mean, you talk about thick-headed. The fact that he became a general is an indictment of the U.S. Army's ability to promote. When they promote morons, this guy is a certifiable moron.
And even in the context that he's talked about in World War II, I mean, I think as you've pointed out here, the Russians inflicted 70%, if I'm not mistaken, of the casualties on Nazi Germany, and we came in relatively late in this. And I mean, not to minimize what we did, but you got to keep it in the context of the whole. Without what the Soviet Union had done over all those years and the millions of casualties they suffered, I don't know what would have happened if we'd have had to face the brunt of the Nazi army by ourselves.
Oh, we would have lost. Russia inflicted 80% of the German casualties, military combat casualties, 80%. So again, he's got Jack Keane lives in a fantasy world, and look, I don't mind someone indulging their fantasies, but when it's getting people killed,
Yeah.
when it's putting
Right.
human lives into the trash heap, and he has no concern about that whatsoever, it is outrageous.
Yeah, you
He's
can
just
add Lindsey Graham to that
despicable.
list.
Yes.
Ben Hodges. Yeah. Anyway, sorry, I don't want to get distracted, even though I'd like to. Let's
Yeah.
circle back around to that Truth Social again, Gary. If you could bring that back up here, I want to take a look at that and look at the first half of it again, or first half of it now with you on there, because Trump has said here that he had just finished talking with the President Putin, and the call lasted about an hour and 15 minutes. We discussed the attack on Russia's docked airplanes by Ukraine and various other attacks that have been taking place by both sides. It was good conversation, but not a conversation that will lead to an immediate peace. Putin did say very strongly, I note that he emphasized that he will have to respond to the recent attacks on the airfields. So first of all, let's just ask you what your thought are on that statement right there that's being highlighted and that Trump emphasized very strongly. What's your guess as to how that conversation went?
Trump is doing everything in his power to defuse and convince the Russians that we had nothing to do with this. So the blowback started Sunday night when Marco Rubio made a frantic phone call to Lavrov to express regrets for the bombings of the trains. Reportedly, he didn't say anything in the public release about talking about the airfields, but I guarantee you that Lavrov had some words for him and made it very clear to him that from Russia's perspective, they could not rule out that the United States was directly involved with these attacks on Russia's strategic nuclear assets. That the reason that those planes were exposed was because Russia continues to abide by the terms of New START, which requires all bombers, all strategic bombers, to be visible to overhead imagery by the other side. And that from the Russian standpoint, unless they got a clarification from the President of the United States that Russia was going to proceed with the assumption that this was an attack endorsed and enabled by the United States. Rubio got off the phone and had a conversation with Donald Trump. Because notice, Donald Trump was dead silent Monday, Tuesday, not a word, not his usual nonsense and spouting off on Truth Social about this, that, and the other thing. And then today, I had a great conversation with Vladimir Putin. Yeah. He called Putin up to ensure Putin, no. We had no idea this was taking place, which is, I'll say it's a lie. We absolutely knew it was taking place. But by distancing himself and assuring Putin that we had nothing to do with this. This is not our fault. And yeah, I understand you're going to have to do something. You're going to have to retaliate. Notice that this incident is so significant, not because the damage it caused was minimal, but because of the nature of the assets that were attacked.
Yeah.
These are part of the strategic nuclear doctrine. Notice that over the last 3 years, we've had multiple terrorist attacks on Russia that have not led to this kind of response by Putin in terms of what he said to Trump and what Putin said today in a video conference call that was broadcast to Russia, where he talked to the head of their intelligence service, the head of the Ministry of Defense, Lavrov, the head of the foreign ministry, other key officials. When the attack on the Kerch Bridge took place, killed some civilians, they didn't say that. When the attack on the Crocus Theater and shopping area, which killed multiple civilians, again, no immediate blame of Ukraine per se in this explicit way. With the murders of 2 or 3 generals, again, no explicit blame.
Yep.
A, explicit. Ukraine is a terrorist nation, and we can't see any value in continuing to talk in negotiations with a terrorist nation.
Yeah. And in fact, if anybody had seen that,
stand.
we actually have that video here. We'll go ahead and play that.
It was a deliberate strike, and it only confirms our suspicions that the illegitimate regime in Kiev that came to power through a coup is now being reborn as a terrorist organization. and its sponsors become supporters of terrorism. Recently, the Ukrainian government and their allies dreamt of inflicting a strategic defeat on Russia on the battlefield. Now they're withdrawing from the battle zone, fleeing, and now the Kiev regime is trying to resort to terrorist attacks. At the same time, they're asking for a ceasefire. They're asking for top-level meetings. But how can we organize such meetings when something like this is happening? What is there to talk about? How can we negotiate with those who are resorting to terrorism? And why should we reward them with a cessation in hostilities, allowing them to receive additional weapons, to continue their mobilization and to prepare for more terrorist attacks like those in the Bryansk and Kursk regions?
So, one of the things that stood out to me about that, and I'm glad I was able to see the video and not just read the readout, was because, at least to my eyes, and you've paid a lot of attention to this, so I'd like your view too, I haven't seen the body language and the facial expressions, that much anger in Putin since his initial speech in February 24th, 2022, where he announced the special military operation had started. How do you see that?
Yeah, you're familiar with the expression, the man is tight-jawed. He's tight-jawed. Yeah, he's angry. And you want to see the contrast. Go back and watch the interviews he did with Oliver Stone. Relaxed, almost smile. Not now. This has created the potential for a crisis in Moscow, because the average person in the street and many people in the military and in the political elite have viewed this as this is like that scene out of Godfather 2 where they attacked Michael Corleone's family. They attacked his family, and he's coming, it was, you could go attack one of his lieutenants, you could go blow up one of his henchmen, but you don't come in and attack my family. And that's exactly how Putin's reacting to this. And I guarantee you, it was not a friendly conversation with Donald Trump. He was direct and he was insistent. And notice Trump at the end. Well, I forgot to point out one other sign that we had that Trump, that Rubio got a stern message from Lavrov that he passed to Trump. Notice yesterday we got word that Pete Hegseth was, that ministers meeting, defense ministers meeting for Ukraine, that the Secretary of Defense of the United States has always attended since the start of this war. I'm not going. And I'm not even showing up on Zoom. Okay? That's Trump sending a message to, we got your message. We're going to stop interacting here with this Ukrainian nonsense. Let the Europeans handle it. That's their fault, not ours. You can go after them. This is, someone to pretend that this is just, no big deal. But I remind your viewers and listeners, go back and look at every of the other. There have been significant terrorist attacks against Russia over the last 3 years. This is the first one where Putin's reacting like this, reacting in public. And there's going to be a response.
Yeah. That's what I was going to go with this, is because at least according to the timing, the call with Trump had to have been somewhere right before or maybe right after this video was made. So that anger was probably still on the phone. So the question is, what do you think is going to result from this? What will Putin do? What is his range?
They've got several options. Options one, up to this point, they've not turned off all the lights and all the power in Ukraine. I think it's highly likely that they will now target and destroy all the electrical nodes, power nodes throughout Ukraine. They'll literally turn the lights off. They may take down some of the bridges from a logistics standpoint to further impose limitations on what Ukraine can do to resupply its troops that are still along the line of contact. I expect them to take out the Ministry of Interior, both the SBU and the GRU, the two branches of the intelligence service. I think they're going to be hit with an Oreshnik missile. Remains to be seen if they're going to allow Zelensky to live. Up to this point, I think Putin saw Zelensky as a useful idiot, and that he was more useful to the Russian position left in power. Now I think they're recognizing he's an obstacle and may have to be removed. But Russia is now pressing this, because the other thing that people ignored, what happened on Monday, this Umarov met with Medinsky, and that was about a 2-hour and 15-minute meeting. So the original meeting was supposed to take place, I think, at like 1 o'clock, and it between the full delegations, and they didn't get together till 2, because Medinsky and Umarov started meeting at about noon, and they didn't get done till like 2:15. And in that meeting, Medinsky delivered the new Russian position, which is almost identical to what Vladimir Putin presented in June of 2024. But it had additional measures and toughened sanctions, but it also came with a message to Umarov. This is your last offer. This is your last chance to keep Ukraine intact. If you don't accept this offer, we are going to take Odessa. We are going to destroy your country, and you will no longer have access to the Black Sea. And when Umarov got out of that meeting, instead of going to the full general session, he took off, headed for the United States, because he had some bad news for Donald Trump and Keith Kellogg and the whole crew. And he passed on what Medinsky said. And then in addition to that, so you got the message coming from Rubio, we got the message coming from Umarov, and then you get the Trump calls Putin to see if he can calm things down.
Okay, hang on a second. But here's somebody who's apparently not in the loop, and that is the leader of the Ukraine side, Volodymyr Zelensky, who he came away after certainly haven't gotten that information, and here's how he characterized things.
Чітка налаштованість Росії на війну, і вони цю свою налаштованість доводять і ударами, і своїми заявами. Все це аргументи, щоб були нові санкції проти Росії, жорсткі санкції. Я хочу подякувати всім американцям, всім європейцям, які підтримують такий шлях примусу Росії до миру. Це надзвичайно важливо. Путін не змінює свою поведінку, коли не боїться наслідків своїх дій. Росія має відчувати, що таке війна. Росія має нести збитки від війни. Вони повинні реально відчути, що продовження війни матиме для них руйнівні наслідки.
One wonders if that, because that was just yesterday, if that's part of what made Putin so mad, that he gave him what he thought was like, this is your last chance to avoid, destruction. And instead he comes out and says that kind of thing. I mean, I'm guessing that fed into the anger somewhere.
Yeah. No, I don't doubt that. Zelensky is he's in Jack Keane world. Let's call it that way.
Two pieces with Lindsey Graham. I think that those three guys are all there together.
Yeah.
So,
and Richard Blumenthal, Demo Dick Blumenthal, the Vietnam hero. All these guys, they have a rich fantasy life, and they're ignoring the reality. Russia's military offensive all along the line of contact has been accelerating over the past 2 weeks. They've actually now got the city of Sumy in sight, visible sight. They've got the high ground, and Ukraine's going to lose Sumy, and then they're going to start the process of losing Dnipropetrovsk. Russia's going to consolidate control of Donetsk.
Let me ask you a question on that, because I heard a commentator yesterday say something I hadn't thought of, and that with the terms that Russia last gave, which was withdrawal from all 4 of the oblasts that had been annexed, obviously Crimea, of course, and then all the demilitarization, denazification stuff, but that it wasn't addressed in that 12-point plan that Medinsky gave. It didn't say anything about Sumy, about Kharkiv, or even about the Kinburn Spit, implying that Russia was willing to give those back. I don't think that's going to be on the table much longer. Or did you see it that way?
Yeah, well, no, and Odessa too. They didn't. Odessa was not mentioned. So far, Russia's willing to say. Basically, their message to the Ukrainians was, "Well, stop this war now. Meet our demands. Pull out of these 4 territories that we have now legally annexed. We want the West to recognize them as well. That includes Crimea. Stay out of NATO. You're going to limit your army, and you know what? You can keep your country. But if you don't do this, then we're going to take Odessa. We're going to shut off your access to the Black Sea. You're not going to be a country anymore. We don't know what you're going to be, but we're going to make sure that you're essentially completely emasculated is probably the kindest term for it. They're going to have the very essence of what makes Ukraine cut out and destroyed. And they're going to defeat them militarily. There's nothing Ukraine can do to stop, even with terrorist attacks. The only effect the terrorist attacks are now having is increasing support for Putin to take stronger, more decisive action. You know, the complaint about Putin has been he's too slow, he's too calm. And the West wants to get rid of Putin. Yeah, we want Medvedev in. He'll take
All right. That'll be a more pleasant face to deal with. I want to ask you something because I hear it a lot of when people are talking about the Russian side, especially. I mean, obviously, some of it is among the Jack Keens and the Lindsey Grahams, et cetera, is that Russia bluffs all the time. They say stuff they don't mean. And I want you to specifically answer that or give me your view on it in light of something that the UN Security Ambassador Nabenzia said a couple of days ago about where we are in the negotiations. Sorry, I threw Gary a curveball there. Gary, if you could throw that Nabenzia one up there.
As long as Kyiv tries to prolong the war and provoke Russia by striking residential and civilian infrastructure on our territory, we will continue our special military operation and destroy objects associated with the military potential of the Kyiv regime. And no new anti-Russian sanctions, arms supplies to Ukraine, or other hostile steps towards Russia will prevent the inevitable military defeat of the Zelensky regime. The choice is now up to Ukraine. Peace as a result of negotiations or inevitable defeat on the battlefield with different conditions for ending the conflict.
Yeah, so is he just bluffing there?
No, not at all. In fact, those who say, "Oh, Russia," Russians are not poker players. Poker players, the people that tend to bluff, that tend to exaggerate what they're holding, that will try to fool you. They're chess players. They don't fool you. You see it right in front of you. You may not be thinking as far ahead as they are because they've already thought 4, 5, 6 moves ahead of you, and you're having trouble catching up to it. But they're not bluffing. They don't make idle threats. That's the one thing I've learned about the Russians that I've associated with. They're not BS artists.
Gary, I'm if you're still, I can't see on the screen down there, but apparently you're being summoned into the show here. People are wanting in. If you're handy, why don't you jump on in here and talk about some other stuff here? Because, I kind of want your view too on where is this going? Because there just seems to be a continued, I don't know, intellectual detachment from reality or whatever, and so many of the West and in Europe, and they keep talking about going on with NATO. And if Larry is right here, that they're playing chess, not poker, then we're about to have a big problem here. So, I mean,
Larry, I thought what a great insight that was, Larry. That difference that so characterizes the difference we're dealing with, the differences between a chess player versus a poker player. Those are two totally different games and two totally different approaches. Might look the same from the outside, but when you understand those games, and it's pretty easy to understand the difference between, even people that don't play those games understand the differences, the dynamics. I thought what a perfect clarification of the difference that's going on, Larry.
Well, you know what? I'm not sure Russia has the stereotype cultural image that we have in the West. The used car salesman. We got the used car salesman in the West, and hey, this only driven once by a little old lady on Sundays for the last 30 years. Trust me, it's a great car. So we're notorious for scams and blowing smoke up people's skirts. The Russians, I have not encountered that over in Russia. They tend to be much more direct or circumspect, but they've got a history born in blood of with the 27 million casualties that died at least in World War II, that still lives with them. And just as a side note, I keep hearing the West, yeah, that was the worst war ever. 60 million people died. Yeah, when you realize like 47 million at least were Russian or Chinese, it helps to explain a lot about Russia and Chinese attitudes with respect to Western bullying these days.
Larry, I thought you explained it perfectly from your last trip when you sat down at the table with Russians, even Lavrov, but others, and that you said that the people there were directly connected to death from World War II.
Yeah.
That everybody there. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, he was just agreeing with you. Yeah.
So you know that how much more personal it is to them that they can taste it, they can feel it. It's so much more a part of who they are as people. Whereas in America, I'm sure there's some families that are like that, but the difference of the magnitude is incomparable to how personally they take it and how much a part of a people and as individuals as they are. It's who they are.
But
and I think I'll even throw in that there's a distinction on the U.S. side, and Larry, I think your comment about the difference between the mentality of playing poker or playing chess is also similar in the understanding of World War II or even military at all. Because here in the United States, whereas in Russia, there's so many with direct family ties to people who were killed and sacrificed in the war, et cetera. Here, it's like there's hardly anybody who has. And our image is like this almost like mythical being of yay for our troops and God bless our troops and they keep us all safe and all this kind of stuff. And so there's no cost. It's just yay, rah, rah. And we feel good about it. So if you're talking about going into a conflict with somebody, it's not a real other than the Americans who have suffered the loss of troops, and it's a big difference to them, massive so, but to the general population, we don't get that connection, and I think they do.
No.
Well, in fact, here's the parallel in the United States. All of the families that have lost a loved one from fentanyl or an overdose of Oxycontin.
Yeah, it's a great.
Now, all of us, so right now we're talking over the last 5 years, maybe 500,000 Americans. Well, now all of a sudden we're talking about something because in all of World War II, the total number of combat deaths in both the European and Pacific theater was like 289,000. There was an additional 113,000 from disease and car accidents.
And
but we've got twice as many. And so those people who've lost loved ones in the fentanyl Oxycontin scourge.
And I know of some of them, by the way.
I do too. I had a nephew that died here in my house.
Oh my!
From it.
In your house, Larry?
In my house, living with us. He was recovering from, he'd gotten on Oxycontin when he was in the hospital, and then we were in the process of trying to help him out, and he got a bad dose of he was starting to self-medicate, and died.
Oh yeah.
And so I bring it back. I didn't lose a single family member, grandfather, aunt, uncle, anything in World War II, but lost family members in this drug war. And that's what Trump and these others don't understand, that when they're dealing with the Russians on this, what happened the other day, it was not in terms of, it was from damage standpoint, it was minimal. But what it represented was an intent to take advantage of Russia complying with an international nuclear control agreement and use that compliance as a vulnerability to attack them. And
Well,
that's why it's so
you know,
damn
and
serious.
plus, you know, it's not limited to that. Obviously, when you're talking about the rail bridges that come in, you can say the bridge itself was a military target, but it seems that they waited to strike until a passenger train was going
Yes.
under it to cause some damage to it. Then you had the attack again on the Kursk bridge, which militarily is not that big of a deal anymore because Russia's figured other ways to supply folks, but it's an emotional point. It's always been tied to Putin, et cetera. So it's like they're intentionally trying to poke Russia. And it seems to me, Larry, that they're going to get what they wanted, but it may not work out the way they thought.
Yeah, no, I agree. You know, I follow a channel on YouTube called Countryside Acres. It's a Canadian family, 8 kids, mom and dad that moved a year ago to Russia, and they've set up a farm. And I mean, it's incredible. They've literally built their house, their barns. They built everything on that property. This father with his 15-year-old son. And then the other kids are younger than that. They do have one 16-year-old daughter. The reason I bring them up, they were on that train just a week ago before this happened.
Wow.
They could have been, you know, if a week later, they could have been on that train. And we're talking about a family that moved to Russia for religious freedom. That's why they're there. And that's what these animals on the Ukrainian side did. It's one thing to attack a train that's carrying military cargo. Okay. Fair target. This wasn't. This was purely a civilian passenger train. And when you start attacking civilians without regard to whether there's any military dimension to it or all, that's the pure definition of terrorism.
Yeah, and you know, I mean, we're going to have to wait and see what happens now. I mean, Putin has just fired a shot across the bow and declared his intent that he's going to take some kind of an action. Trump has acknowledged it. I thought it was interesting in that True Social that Trump didn't say anything about I tried to talk him out of it or he shouldn't do it or anything. He just kind of, matter of factly, said it's going to come. So we'll be interested in seeing number one, what they actually do, and then number two, what is the American reaction to it?
Yeah, but it's clear that Trump's certainly singing a different tune now than he was a week ago.
Indeed.
You know, so he wasn't calling Putin crazy. He's acting out of his mind.
Right.
Yeah, no, he said he's going to go whack him, and hey, everybody get the hell out of the way.
Yeah. There is a notable difference here. And, you know, and I think we had John Mearsheimer on a show earlier today, and he said that his assessment of the overall strategic situation of the United States right now is, quote, "We're screwed." Because he says Trump has gotten us into so many different problems that and I even asked him at the end, I said, if Trump was watching this and he asked, how can I extricate myself from this? He couldn't do it. He said, I don't know if he did everything I told him right now, we'd be able to pull ourselves out of all these problems. And he also added in the Asia Pacific area, with the 2 areas in the Middle East with the Gaza war and also with potential war with Iran and then the Russia-Ukraine war. And it's hard for me to argue that we're not in a really tough place.
First law of crisis management: when you're in a hole, stop digging.
Now, that's one thing that Trump could do. I hope he's watching this show too.
Stop. Don, put the shovel down. Get out of the damn hole.
That'll go a long way towards stop getting in and making it worse. Well, listen, appreciate you coming on today. You know, and I know you got a trip coming up. Hopefully, we'll talk to you about that on the backside of that. We'll be real eager to hear whatever it is you discover in that. And we thank you guys all for watching to us. And sorry for belatedly, not bringing in Gary as the bullpen asked for earlier, because everybody loves to have him part of this, especially when Larry's on. But thank you all. Be sure to like and subscribe if you haven't. And folks, we got some great shows coming up for you the rest of the week and into the next week. So a lot of things happening. Come here to Daniel Davis Deep Dive, because we are unintimidated and uncompromised to bring you the truth you need to make sense of your world. Thank you very much. See you on the next episode.